Hi, everyone. Hi, I am your host, Henry Clavo, CEO and founder of Orlando Insight Group. Each episode, we dive into real conversations with technology leaders and innovators and experts who are shaping the future of IT, data, and cybersecurity. Our goal is simple to give you practical insights, real world strategies, and expert perspective that you can use to drive smarter decisions and strong results for your business. Thank you for joining us. And here's a short bio of our guest tonight. Her name is Anna Sajer. So she's a technology development module engineer at Intel, where she's helping shape the future of semiconductor manufacturing. Her work focuses on development and yield improvements within Intel's logic technology development divisions, advancing materials and methods behind the next generation chips. She currently completed her Master's of Engineering in Materials Science and Engineering at UC Berkeley, where she specialized in electronic and optical materials, exploring how new materials can drive innovation in chip design and performance. Beyond her technical achievement, Anna is a passionate advocate for women in STEM. Through the Society of Women Engineers, she's held multiple leadership roles, including Vice President of Professional Development, DEI Chair, and Mentor, and recently won the SWE Esteemed New Professional Award for her community impact and technical achievements. Her efforts have helped build a stronger, more inclusive engineering community across the Portland region, inspiring students and professionals alike. Outside of engineering, Anna brings her energy to the slopes as a IFSA free ride judge, mentoring young athletes and advocating for inclusivity in competitive skiing. With a background in business ownership and foundation in chemical engineering from the University of Utah, Anna blends technical mastery, mentorship, and genuine passions for engineering others. So, Anna, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Henry, and I'm really excited to be here. So appreciate you having me. Excited to dive into some questions.
Awesome. What drew you into material science and semiconductors?
Yeah, that's a great starting question. It's kind of a long answer. So originally when I was at University of Utah doing chemical engineering, I was pretty set on doing either med devices or pharmaceuticals. I was super interested in kind of that intersection of process manufacturing and engineering, and then also some of the life sciences aspect. But along the way, I had a couple friends and colleagues who had graduated from my program who started working at Intel. And I got super intrigued. I didn't know too much about semiconductors. And yeah, that was a great pathway right into my role at Intel. So yeah, I started out in more of a process engineering and manufacturing role. So that entailed mainly efficiency of output throughout the factory and some quality related projects. So then after that, I ended up getting more into development as I got up to speed on all the technologies and how the factory runs. Also, the factory is called the fab, which is what I'll refer to it as for a lot of the time. Yeah, so once I became more of a senior engineer in a development role, that's when I started noticing how important that materials and material selection and behavior are for advancing the technology nodes. So that's how that came into play.
That's amazing. It's whoever you associate with, they really make a difference in what direction you go, especially now that you're doing interesting technology work, and it's really relevant now in today's times, and especially in geopolitical times right now. You balance both hands-on engineering and leadership. How did those two paths begin to intersect for you?
Yeah, so a few people told me once that leadership is something that is acquired. It's not necessarily something that you're born with or built with. It's definitely something that comes with a lot of practice and experience doing different things. And that was definitely the case for me. I feel like was decently shy for a lot of my earlier life, but I got very interested in external clubs at University of Utah. So I helped out a lot with SWE, Society of Women Engineers, the student chapter. And then I was also on student government, specifically for the College of Engineering. I was an assembly representative for the College of Engineering. And then I also was a secretary for AICHE, which is our American Institute of Chemical Engineers. So through those, I kind of saw how leadership and engineering went hand in hand, because that's a lot of how your business components today are, run and also understood by the general public, is being able to pair those two hand in hand.
That makes sense. Yeah, if you're able to express it in a way that's communicable to the audience, I think that's best way forward in a field that is very technical and very advanced, especially at your level. Intel is known for pushing the limits of chip technology. What excites you most about working at the frontier of semiconductor manufacturing?
Yeah, I would say along the way, the whole thing has been super exciting. Right when I started, I was super amazed by the fab and how everything runs
Mm,
basically automatically for the most part.
mm,
Um, Aside from occasional things, it really doesn't require much human interference. So I think the whole component of very automated factories is super interesting to me, not just, for semiconductors itself, but for anything, in terms of efficiency and quality. But
mm,
also, as we start to progress towards smaller and more advanced technologies, really being able to properly, like I mentioned, select materials. And then there's a lot of pressure on us to create systems that are more efficient, because as we know, things like AI consume a
mm.
lot of energy. And
Right.
so trying to find more ways that we can do the same or similar things, but be more efficient about how we do it in the long run. So yeah, a lot of great things coming. And then also, yeah, Moore's law, it's got to keep going. But right now we're kind of looking at some cost restrictions. Everything's getting smaller, more powerful, but it's not necessarily getting any cheaper. So that's another issue that we're working through.
Funny you mentioned that. We had someone previously who worked on AI, and essentially the next step is not having models that inputs tokens, but having a more efficient model that reduces the amount of tokens it takes in to give the same results. So in a way, that industry is also helping you, and you also help in the other industry. That I find that fascinating.
Definitely. It's all completely interconnected. So yeah, lots of moving parts.
What I found interesting, before Intel, you entered for KW Engineering. So this project involved both processes, your role and likely mechanical and HVAC engineering. How did you coordinate your analysis, like the heat calculations, and with mechanical engineers, if any, for selecting the physical specification of the new tower? So it's a big undertaking, I would imagine, as your first internship.
Yeah, and it was super interesting because it was a smaller company. I did get to do a lot more hands-on work and just kind of work more broadly with our clients. We had a lot of independent clients across the Salt Lake area where University of Utah was. But yeah, definitely, because a decent amount of chemical engineering is very process related, but also we do spend a lot of time in our classes doing things like, looking at chillers and fitting heat exchangers and modeling all these things in programs like Aspen Plus or Promax.
Hmm.
So I would say for that part, a lot of it was pretty accessible and easy for me to do, especially as an intern still in school. But yes, definitely a lot of work with other mechanical engineers on certain components that maybe I hadn't had a bunch of knowledge on. And a lot of it is working with vendors too. So we'd look at, who is supplying these cooling towers or these chillers or anything along those lines. And we'd get a lot of specifications from them, which was super helpful.
Wow.
And then a lot of it was just making sure that you're designing correctly for the capacity load that our clients were looking for. So, you don't want to overdo it too much because we are trying to save them money and energy, but also making sure that they do have some room for expansion if needed.
Oh, wow. Yeah, the scaling aspects of providing that type of work, amazing. Um, what lessons that from the internship that carry over that now you're doing that in your engineering career currently?
Yeah, I would say a lot of it, especially the customer part and the client relations part,
Mm,
is the way that I see it at my work now at Intel is all the other external groups that I work with, even though they are all within the same company, everyone does something slightly different. And so it's really important to be able to communicate with groups of people who might not be experts in what you're doing, but
mm,
to help them understand and be educated on the problem from a technical standpoint, but still maybe people from not a super technical background. So that specifically would be our clients, but then also, if I'm corresponding with the lab at Intel, or maybe some other business units who might not be super familiar with the manufacturing process.
Obviously, department silos, it's very common, I guess, throughout everywhere. So having that skill, reaching out and, speaking to them on a human level, and then extending that handshake in order to get work done. So yeah, that makes sense. Now, this is a nice segue to the next question, because your title is very it's different. So you're working in logic technology development under Intel's Edge Group. Can you share what that means in plain language for people outside the industry and for our audience as well?
Yes, definitely, because it is quite hard to understand. So the way that I like to put it is the chip making process as a whole is split into probably about 4 to 5 main steps, and those all do different things, and those are how the engineers throughout the company in the LTD group are split up. So for example, one of them is planarization and polishing, which is when you polish down the wafer. Another one is thin films, where you're depositing these incredibly thin films of mostly metals, but also other materials as well. Another one very popular is lithography, which is where you are printing through lenses and light. You're printing the patterns on the wafers. And then chemical etch is the part where you're really setting those in and removing layers through etching with chemicals. There is also a dry etch component too, which is where you're using lasers and plasmas to etch not with wet chemicals. And then there's also other components like diffusion and annealing, which is that one's a bit more complex. Yeah. But for the most part, those are all the types of groups that engineers can be in. So coming from a chemical engineering background, it was pretty easy to put me in wet chemical etch. And yeah, that's where I've been ever since. And it's been super interesting. That's where I went from manufacturing more to development. So yeah, it's a very critical part of the manufacturing flow.
Yeah, you have to be very precise. The integration of physics, chemistry, and just the elements is really crucial. So that's why you pursue your master's to get that to that level. So that makes sense, and that's why you're an expert in your field. And how do process development and yield improvements actually influence innovation in chip design and performance?
Yeah, so like I was mentioning earlier, any time that you can make the process more efficient is going to make a huge difference, because as everything's getting more complex, a lot smaller, and also very expensive, there's a lot of ways that you can get creative. So maybe you can reduce how much chemical you're using, or maybe you can use a different material that has a better performance. And, sometimes there's a big difference between research and development and then manufacturability, because a lot of times, and we see this very often, is you come up with something and it works very well, but there's a big difference between that and being able to replicate it and manufacture it and sell it. So that's a key consideration when selecting different materials, and also just deciding what's going to stay for the final product.
Thank you for mentioning that. How do collaboration and cross-functional teamwork play into innovation at a place like Intel? I'm sure you work with many different groups and smart
Definitely.
people.
Yeah, this one's really important, because like I mentioned before, since you have groups of engineers that all focus on something slightly different, it's really important that you understand that aspect of cross communication and cross-functional team leadership, because even though everyone is ideally working on the same problem, people are coming at it from different angles. So like I mentioned, you have the lithography people, or maybe you have the planar or thin films people. We don't necessarily understand each other component as well as they do, because that's their focus. So yeah, really being able to listen and understand and see what the issue looks like from their point of view for their tool set is really important.
That makes sense. Yeah, collaboration, communication, and the ability to work in a room without blockers or things of that nature. That makes sense. Thank you, Anna. Now we can move on to leadership and Society of Women Engineers. You've been deeply involved with the Society of Women for years, from VP of Professional Development to DI chair. What motivated that commitment?
Yeah, so since I started in SWE at University of Utah,
Mm,
I've just been super interested and also seeing the impact of what SWE can do for women in engineering. Um, because SWE does have a lot of stats that say, like there are less and less women working in engineering for the more years
mm,
that they've been in the field. So, 5, 10, 15 years. And so it's really important to have a space for women and, anyone else to feel seen in engineering,
mm,
um, and just STEM fields in general. So, yeah, I was drawn by the inclusiveness and just the large community that SWE has. They have thousands of members worldwide. So
mm,
it's a really great network to be part of. And then, yeah, I started being more in that leadership space when I started work after undergrad. I definitely wanted to stay connected and, still be very active in the community. I feel like it's hard for people to be in organizations or keep up with organizations outside of school. So that was something that was very important to me.
mm.
And yeah, when I came here to Portland and started working, I joined as membership chair and I got to plan some really impactful events. Then I progressed into VP of professional development, and now I'm in more of a DEI role. So, yeah, a lot of advocacy and working with other groups in the Portland area. So that includes like NSBE and SHIP and other organizations for minority groups in engineering.
Awesome, awesome. I had a conversation with one of my teammates regarding our field, and we're uh, mostly male area, so we collaborate. But based on your experience and working now in your internship and currently in Intel, what has helped women not pursue this long term, and what are the challenges that they're facing based on your experience?
Yeah, and I've had a lot of conversations with people about this at SWE, at the conferences, and just in various roundtables from the events that I've planned. But I think a lot of it is either attributed to maybe a not great work environment and culture.
Mm,
Um, yeah, I can't speak too much on that one because I do feel very supported in my area with a lot of women in leadership. But there's definitely some places where, and industries as well, like
mm,
certain industries that have been historically, male dominated or just very traditional in that
right,
sense.
right.
It can definitely be more of a tough place for women to work. And then there is another component too, which is engineering doesn't have necessarily the most flexible work schedule or setup. So, especially for a lot of women who have to leave to take care of a family or do caretaking for elders,
Mm.
sometimes it can be very hard for them to find like a part-time balance or even to come back at all. So that's a large challenge.
Oh yes, that is, yeah, especially caretakers and people in general who something happens in life. So uh, having that cushion, having that support really goes a long way. But thank you for sharing your insights on that, Anna. And congratulations on winning the SWE Leadership Award. What did that recognition mean to you personally?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very excited about this. Yeah, I actually recently wrote a little blog article about this. I do some writing on a Substack, but definitely being your biggest advocate is super important because I tell a lot of people that, I applied for this award. I nominated myself, which is actually very common for the SWE awards is most of the time people are self-nominating and people, hear that and they're like, why would you nominate yourself? But yeah, it's very common for this. And I know the award isn't maybe like a super common situation, but yeah, if you feel like you should be recognized for something and it's within your scope, then I just tell people to go for it for sure. But yeah, back to the original question, it's really nice. I appreciate being recognized for the work that I've done specifically for Society of Women Engineers. The Columbia River section is the one I'm part of here in Portland. Yeah, I've planned a lot of great events and really had it as my mission to create a really inclusive space, especially for women coming from out of state or coming for work. Yeah, and just making sure that everyone has access to more resources that maybe their work can't provide, or things that they feel like they might be missing day to day.
Definitely.
So, yeah. And I will be attending the conference next week to officially go pick up my award. So yeah.
Oh, wow. Would it be in Portland or somewhere nice like Vegas or
It's
something?
in New Orleans. Yeah.
Oh.
So every fall in October, they have a worldwide conference for every member of SWE to go attend. And then in the springtime, they do smaller regional conferences. So then it's more companies from your area, speakers from your area. So they're a bit more local and a bit more tight knit.
Oh, nice. Maybe at the end, I could, after the end of the interview, you could share more about it, so I could share with the audience, women and people are interested in being part of this, and have more information. So that'll be great.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
And okay, now moving on to mentorship, growth, and mindset. You mentor students at UC Berkeley and SWE. What's one piece of advice you find yourself giving repeatedly?
Yeah, and this definitely has two components, because there's some advice that I will give my mentees over and over, but then there's also some that I continue to give other mentors and help them be better at their mentorship. So I would say what I give to my mentees most often is that your network and personal connections are so valuable. They're more valuable than a lot of people think. So really make sure you utilize those. So whether you're, making a career transition, or you're a student applying to jobs, or you're maybe a high school student looking at colleges, really make sure that you're utilizing your network. And it doesn't even have to be a super, deep connection. It could be maybe someone that you were at a summer camp with, or some like a family friend. It could be anyone. Because as long as you have someone to help you and vouch for you, and especially your character and work ethic, that will get you very far. So it was funny, because when I was applying for my first jobs right out of undergrad, there was a point where I was in an email chain with, I think it was my mom's client's ex-husband's coworker, somebody, like it is a very loose connection, but especially in this day and age where, it's the job market's tough. It's really important to have a connection. Because even if, say you have a friend and someone's like, hey, I know, Henry, do you think that you could maybe make a warm intro? So yeah, if I had a friend coming to me and they said, hey, I've got someone, at least I know that my friend is reliable and they can, they can advocate for someone's character and work ethic. So that's super important. And then also, if you're a college student, you have a lot on your side in terms of, saying, hey, I'm a student, I'm really interested in, this and this. A lot of college students will sometimes, I feel like, beat themselves up because they feel like they're at the bottom. But that's definitely not true. You have a lot of power as a student to say, hey, I'm interested in this, I am a student. When people come up to me and, as a working professional, I love helping out students. So that's one component. But then another thing I'd say that's really important for the mentorship part itself is, if you are a mentor to any mentee, it doesn't make you a bad mentor or any less of one if you can't help them with every single thing, or if you're not an expert in every single field. So for example, I had a mentee and they were super interested in a PhD, and they really, really wanted to apply for a PhD, which was awesome. I had no experience applying for a PhD. I knew I wanted to do industry, and then go back to school at some point and work on industry and business focused problems. But of course, you can, the point is that you're helping to the best of your abilities and you're in a position to guide them through the process. So, things like interview prep or resumes, or, just talking about long-term, what industry that they'd like to end up in after the PhD type thing. But then ultimately also ending the mentorship in a good way. For example, directing them to people who can help with some of those things that you can't help with. And that's a big part of it, is not everything has to come from you directly. So yeah, once I helped to the best of my abilities and the official mentorship program ended, I sent them contacts who had applied for PhDs multiple times and people who were, super familiar with that process. And yeah, I think that's one thing that a lot of mentors forget is, making sure that they have a connection with others and more of a network from you. That's another part of it.
Wow. You remind me of somebody in the previous podcast that he's always engaging students, always involved in activities. And if there's any opportunities, he will forward them, he will help them apply. Kudos to you, Anna, for, sending that elevator down for other people to get in. So awesome.
Yep, that's important.
So what habits or philosophies helped you stay balanced and grounded amidst such a demanding field, especially engineering?
Yeah, I would say it depends on if it's work related or non-work related. I would say if we're talking work, really make sure that you've got your time management down. It's okay to set aside maybe some time on your calendar if you have to block out time that others can see, just for you to do some deep work, because it's super easy to get caught up in meetings and, oh, are you free for a quick chat type thing. So that's definitely something I'd recommend. It's a small habit, but it works really well. So whether that's morning, evening, any time. And then definitely outside of work, I would say get involved in an organization that you can help out with, and one that matters with impact. So I do a lot of SWE work, of course, but, it could be anything from, volleyball, or maybe you volunteer at an animal shelter, but something to kind of take you away from your everyday work. Because, yeah, sometimes if that's all you do, especially early career, when you're very, excited for this first opportunity, it can be easy to just put all your energy into that. And yeah, you definitely want to make sure that you're diversifying and even using skills that you might not utilize at work. So bring that creative side, do some volunteering. It all really helps.
How do you distress with the demanding work Intel, Anna?
Yeah, so me personally, definitely the setting the time aside, but also, things at work are really important, like, just little casual lunches and team builders and just, yeah, ways that you can just kind of reset. And personally, I do a lot of working out. I like to go to the gym. That's how I reset. So I'd really think about what helps you reset and just, yeah, roll with that.
Nice. Has there been one mentor or a moment with a mentor that shaped the way that your career has so far happened for you?
Yeah, I'm going to pick probably the first one that got me into engineering in general. I was first really inspired by my dad. He's a civil engineer. But it's nice for a parent to be able to help you out, but I feel like it's completely separate for you to see yourself in someone else. So, for example, when I was in high school looking at which majors to pick, I had a teammate who was on my ski team who, I looked up to her in many ways. She was on my ski team. She was very active in just the community, and she was, yeah, she looked like me. I appreciated her. And so she did chemical engineering as well. And I hadn't heard of that before. And we bonded over a mutual interest of specifically organic chemistry, but also just, the importance of those two together, chemistry plus chemical engineering, which is, yeah, kind of a interesting little niche thing. So it's nice to have someone who, you can almost like see yourself in a few years. And so she really helped to get me into engineering. And then, of course, support from your fellow students, because once you all get, say into school or into work, a lot of similarities occur. So maybe we're inspired by a parent or a friend or, somebody. So that's really important, even though that's not, maybe say official mentorship, like you weren't like given a mentor, you still have someone who inspired you to do something.
Oh yeah, I agree. Especially when someone is there to support you, pull you on, and make you move to the next level by uh, making things not easy for you. So that's a good thing to have. And what I found interesting, wow, you bonded over organic chemistry. I'm not a big fan of organic chemistry. It's very over my head, but that's interesting. Cool.
Yeah, I liked organic chemistry, but P-chem or quantum chem, that was quite difficult. So
Yeah. Okay, so I guess we can move on to when you think about the next decade of your career, what do you hope to build in both in technology and in the community that you're currently involved in?
yeah, I would say, especially since I recently wrapped up school, um, working my way towards that more official management and technical type position, because you don't have to be labeled as a manager or somebody to be a technical leader. So ideally, I could keep doing what I'm doing, being active in the community, being a leader at work, and then ideally I'd like to work up to that official position so I could really start implementing more of that.
Is a PhD in your future, pursuing that next level?
Um, I don't think so, just because, I specifically picked my Berkeley program because of how it combined technical and leadership components. I was possibly considering an MBA,
Mhm.
although, I've heard some mixed things, but we'll see if that's in my future. So
Oh, you have to come back and let us know how what path you took. That'll be interesting.
definitely.
Finally, Anna, if you could leave listener with one message about engineering, leadership, or life, what would it be?
I would say everything's moving very fast. The world and innovations are all very complicated and moving quickly. So I always stress the importance of continuous learning. So whether you're doing a certificate or you're listening to a podcast or you're reading some kind of book, it's all super important. And definitely also stressing making your voice heard and just trying to be a leader um, in your industry or in your area, because many voices and many diverse voices really, help the innovations keep going. So that's what I would say.
Perfect, perfect. And where could they find you if they want to reach out to you, Anna?
I have a LinkedIn and an Instagram, and then I also have my Substack. It's annasager.substack or annasager.substack.com. I'll put it somewhere. So
Awesome.
you can find me there. I'm the only person with my name, so I'm pretty easy to find. I do post some different blog articles on my Substack as well as a personal portfolio. So definitely stay tuned for some more articles from me.
Oh, definitely. I will share it with our audience on their next LinkedIn post once this is posted, and they'll learn more about you. So, Anna, thank you so much for being part of the podcast. We learned so much about you, about leadership, and your expertise. We look forward to hear more from you in the future. Please come back and let us know how it went.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Well, thank you everyone for being part of the Orlando Inside podcast. If you want to subscribe, and join our LinkedIn channel for more episodes like this, please sign up. You have a good evening and take care.